I don't know if any game in history has been received with such public and critical acclaim, only for it to be hated and loathed years after its release. When DK64 released in 1999, it was applauded by critics, with them praising its length, number of collectibles, and gameplay mechanics, with IGN saying, "This is Rare's War and Peace. It's that simple." These days, when there's a conversation about DK64, it's usually about how much people hate the game and nothing else. The hate has grown so strong in recent years that some developers say that DK64 is to blame for the death of the 3D platform genre as a whole. And as someone who loved the game as a kid and has never replayed it as an adult, I was curious to why this game received so much hate. So I did a little research and ended up coming away with 3 main reasons. It has too many collectibles, the character switching mechanic pads out the game, and the minigames are repeated too often. Now that I have my reasons, I wanted to put them to the test and see once and for all if the haters were right. So that's what I did. Join me now as I break down DK64 in each of these 3 categories. So the first category I looked at was the too many collectibles critique. I did this by counting every collectible in DK64 that counts towards 100% completion of the game. I then took 3 other 3D platformers and did the same thing, to get a sort of baseline I could compare DK64 to. Those 3 games were Banjo-Tooie, Mario 64, and Mario Odyssey. Absolute staples in the 3D platforming genre. If Donkey Kong 64 had a comparable number of collectibles to these games, then we could probably put the too many collectibles critique to rest. But if it had a substantial amount more, then maybe the haters were right after all. So let's get into it, starting first with Banjo-Tooie. Banjo-Tooie has a total of 1,104 collectibles, 45 Jinjos, 18 Globos, 1 Mega Globo, 25 Cheeto pages, 900 notes, 90 Jickeys, and 25 extra honeycomb pieces. Mario 64 has a total of 1,798 total collectibles, 120 Power Stars, 2 keys, 176 red coins, and 1,500 regular coins. There are actually 2,672 coins in the game, but you only need 1,500 of them to complete it. Mario Odyssey has 2,082 collectibles in the game, 999 moons, 1,000 purple coins, 40 outfits, and 43 souvenirs. And finally, we've come to DK64. I hope you're ready for this. Donkey Kong 64 has 3,500 color bananas, 201 golden bananas, 10 battle crowns, 20 banana fairies, 40 blueprints, 40 banana medals, 8 boss keys, 1 Nintendo coin, and 1 Rareware coin for a grand total of 3,821 total collectibles. That is almost double Mario Odyssey's total of 2,082, which is the next closest game to DK64. Donkey Kong 64's 3,500 color bananas alone beat out Tooie's, and Odyssey's, and Mario 64's total number of collectibles, which honestly just blows my mind. If you think the sample size here is too low and this doesn't convince you, listen to this. Donkey Kong 64 holds a spot in the Guinness Book of World Records for the most collectibles in a 3D platformer in history. Yeah, I think saying this game has too many collectibles is an understatement. Give the haters a point on this one. So the next critique I looked at was the character switching mechanic. If you're unaware of how this works, every collectible in the game is color-coded, and only the Kong with the same corresponding color can pick up that collectible. So if there's a red banana, for example, only Diddy can pick it up, but he can't pick up any other color. And with there being 5 different Kongs that the player can choose from, that means there's 5 different sets of color collectibles that each Kong has to collect separately. And this leads to situations where you'll be playing as one Kong and come across collectibles meant for a different Kong that you can't pick up. So you have to go back to the character switch barrel, change to the correct Kong, and go all the way back to where you previously were to pick up those items. Naturally, this leads to a lot of backtracking. It makes levels feel longer than they should because you're always retreading the same ground. So I wanted to figure out exactly how much time is spent backtracking in a level to see if this complaint was valid or not. So what I did was track the movement of each Kong in a 100% completion run of the game's first world, Jungle Japes. I did this by literally drawing each Kong's path on a map of Jungle Japes, so I could keep track of where each Kong had been. Anytime a Kong would go to an area where a different Kong had already been, I would start a timer, and time them until they entered a new area where no Kong had previously entered. I then added all the instances of this occurring throughout the level for each Kong until I had a total time spent backtracking for Jungle Japes. It took 71 minutes to 100% Jungle Japes. 25 minutes and 34 seconds of that 71 minutes was spent backtracking. So 36% of the time spent in Jungle Japes was dedicated solely towards backtracking. 36% of the level is just going back to areas you've already been to. In fact, there are only 3 areas in the entire level that you don't go to more than once. This mining area, this beehive, and this lake. Every other area in the level you go to at least more than once. And remember, this is just the first world in the game. Some of the later worlds in Donkey Kong 64 get incredibly complex, meaning that this backtracking percentage would probably skyrocket in later levels like Fungi Forest or Crystal Caves. So I would call character switching padding out the length of the game a valid criticism. Okay, so the final critique we're going to look at is the minigames are repeated too often. For this, I took a look at all 54 barrel stage minigames to see how often they were repeated. If they repeated, I counted how many times they did, and then I ordered them from least repeated minigames to the most repeated. Okay, so let's get into it, starting with the least repeated. Stash Snatch is only played once. Mad Maze Mall, Speedy Swing Sortie, Splish Splash Salvage, and Stealthy Snoop are all played 2 times. Minecart Mayhem, Minecart Ride, and Busy Barrel Barrage are played 3 times. Peril Path Panic, Teetering Turtle Trouble, Batty Barrel Bandit, and Beaver Brother have to be played 4 times. And Big Bug Bash, Kremlin Kosh, Crazy Kong Clamor, and Searchlight Seek are all played 5 effing times. I don't know if you've noticed, but the only minigame not repeated was Stash Snatch. Out of 54 total minigames, there is only 1 that is original. Out of the 54 minigames, only 13 of them are actually different. Looking at this, I don't think there's any doubt that the minigames are repeated too often. I can see replaying a minigame once or twice, but 3 or 4 times is just too many. And speaking of too many, that's another complaint about the minigames, is that there's just too many of them. So I already mentioned that there's 54 barrel stage minigames, but what I didn't mention is that there's other minigames. There are 10 Hideout Hell minigames, 10 Battle Arena minigames, and 7 race minigames, which adds up to 81 in total. And just to show you how absurd that number is, I compared it to the total number of minigames in every mainline Mario Party game. And only 3 Mario Parties have more minigames than Donkey Kong 64. Donkey Kong 64 has more minigames than games based around minigame compilations. That really is the story of Donkey Kong 64 though, isn't it? Too much. Too many collectibles, too much backtracking, and too many minigames. But if you're a gamer that likes that sort of thing, then Donkey Kong 64 is a dream come true. And if you don't, it's an absolute nightmare. I can really see both sides. I just hope with this video I was able to highlight exactly what makes people hate Donkey Kong 64.